Hello, everyone. This is Keith Stone with the Center for Hellenic Studies, and it's time for another installment of HeroesX Office Hours. Today is hour 9 and 10, though really we only have much of a discussion for hour 9. And I should introduce the cast of characters here. Professor Gregory Nagy, Janet and Elen and Sarah. And, well, I already said who I am. So, hour 9. The question is... I'm Keith. How do the first 9 lines of the Odyssey help us understand this epic? Simple question.
Well, you could say that if that's all we had, we'd have a pretty good idea of what the Odyssey is about.
It's an it's a narrative.
It's a narrative. It gives you in broad brushstrokes what the agenda are. What I love about it is that it goes beyond the parameters of our Odyssey. In other words, this kind of narrative is almost never ending because after the reunion with Penelope, he goes off again, or he is destined to go off again for new adventures, leaving his wife behind again.
Wait, is that in the first 9 lines you're saying?
Well, no, I'm not really saying.
Okay.
I'm not saying that the first 9 lines spell it out, but they certainly leave room for that, because seeing the cities of many men, if you look at all the Odyssey traditions, would include a lot more cities than what our Odyssey handles. And by cities, of course, it's not just cities, but non-cities.
Communities or settlements, or
yeah, well, I'm even thinking
not
of
just cities.
Yeah, you could say that in the Cave of the Cyclops, to give the perfect example of a non-city, an ostentatiously uncivilized place that doesn't look like a city. In that case, the Cave of the Cyclops doesn't seem to be part of the adventures as indicated by Odyssey 9. So I guess I'm contradicting myself about how, this gives you the entire Odyssey. I shouldn't have said as we know it. You could say the entire Odyssey writ large, but maybe with more of an emphasis on seeing various different cities. And certainly when Odysseus and Penelope are reunited, he tells her about all the adventures he had visiting all these cities. He doesn't talk about the Cave of the Cyclops to Penelope directly, at least.
Mm-hmm.
It's very strange.
Well, how about some of the participants' comments?
Yes, there is one question at the beginning. You know, who is the muse?
Yes.
To whom the rhapsody is singing.
And it's such a good question. I really started looking at what I have been publishing online about that, and it's not really all that clear in what I have put online, what I really think. There's just more to it, I guess. In the so-called samplings of comments on the Iliad and the Odyssey, that set of comments, I talk a lot about how both the Iliad and the Odyssey invoke a single muse, but I don't talk about who that muse might be. And I personally think, even though I didn't spell it out in those comments, I spell it out elsewhere in the book, Homer the Pre-Classic. It can be argued that the singular muse would be Calliope. We would pronounce it Calliope, the mother of Orpheus. But that gets us into a complex set of reconstructions concerning epic. Is epic tradition something that can be traced back to the style of a poet figure like Orpheus? And my answer would be yes, but to try to prove that would be difficult in just a few minutes. But would it be enough to say that there are Orphic elements in Homeric poetry, maybe the most blatant of which is the narrative in Odyssey 11 concerning the visit of Odysseus to Hades. Every time he says, I saw A, and I saw B, and I saw C, there are resonances that are clearly Orphic. It's Orpheus who, in other traditions, says, I saw A, and I saw B, and I saw C, from A to Z. And there are other hints about Orphic traditions, like the reference to the good ship Argo, sailed by the Argonauts. That tradition is very Orphic. And so you could say that the singular muse is a kind of signature for a more old-fashioned kind of epic that has more elements that anthropologists would describe as shamanistic. By shamanistic, what anthropologists mean is, that old Siberian term, shaman, having to do with especially endowed person within a society who performs vision quests, that is to say, adventures of the mind, where the body can even stay put, but where the mind travels to places that the community could never possibly even imagine, let alone visit. And so I guess another way to say it is a singular muse emphasizes the more shamanistic aspects of muses as the goddesses who inspire the singer.
So Greg, can I maybe pick up on that a little bit?
Yes.
I saw one of the sort of shamanistic things, it was occurring to me, is where they're almost sort of disconnected from themselves. And one of our participants is talking about how the comrades are disconnected, but they don't kind of reconnect. And also there's Telemachus, who is described as disconnected, and he has his own story. We start off with it, it's going to be about Odysseus, but suddenly we go into Telemachus.
Yes. And in so many ways, the Odyssey is not just a journey of a soul, but, to put it another way, a vision quest of the mind, if I can say it in shamanistic ways. A vision quest where, as the mind travels and makes connections with other minds in other places, most of which are far away from the here and now, the mind expands and connects. And in fact, connecting the dots is the way to expand as you go from city to city to city. And that kind of connectivity of the mind, that kind of mental journey, is a different kind of epic than the kind of epic where a city is being besieged, or where two vast armies clash on a plain, or all these other things that we associate with primarily the Iliad. And as in so many ways, the Odyssey is complementary to the Iliad. It explores aspects of what you and I can sometimes loosely call epic, that are different from each other, even though they can complement each other. And I'm not saying that the Iliad is totally non-shamanistic and the Odyssey is totally shamanistic, just as I don't want to say that the Iliad claims to have a plot that is equivalent to the will of Zeus, whereas the Odyssey doesn't, because again, free will and the will of the gods get mixed up not only in the Odyssey but also in the Iliad. So I guess this might be the time for us to take a few steps back and just marvel at the complementarity of the Odyssey with the Iliad, and how we sometimes see the other side of the same coin much more clearly. And even with the singular muse, it's easier to understand a singular muse who may be an Orphic muse when we experience the Odyssey than it is when we experience the Iliad. Why should there be one muse that somehow controls the whole narration in the Iliad? That's harder to imagine, especially when we get to the catalog of ships in Iliad 2, where all 9 of the muses, I gather, or I guess, are invoked.
In the first lines of Odyssey, the absence of Odysseus, his name,
Yes.
how significant is that? And we, audience and Telemachus, we need to mentally connect again to bring him back.
Yes.
And to bring stories from Iliad back to the audience.
Yes.
And what Telemachus is trying to do that, I think.
I think that's beautiful, and what you said about Andra, the man, also shows us that this kind of poetry does not have to emphasize Odysseus. I can imagine starting an epic about Orpheus this way. It doesn't have to be Odysseus, and then the identity of Odysseus, just as you say, is pieced together or is reconnected, and it has to be reconnected with the community in the here and now, and that's represented by Telemachus, the son, who is not even sure that Odysseus is his father at the beginning. He's really disconnected, and I don't know, I find the disorientation of Odysseus, who's there in a cave, he's in the darkness, so he wouldn't know inside a cave where east and west are, and when the sun comes up and when the sun goes down. So he is disoriented mentally and emotionally, and the sun is disoriented, and then it takes the goddess of intelligence, Athena, to connect all the dots for the heroes, for who the man is. And it's also interesting that as people like Richard P. Martin show, somebody like Telemachus doesn't even belong in the heroic age, because in some ways it's the Trojan War that defines the heroic age, even in the Odyssey. So when the war is over, are there still heroes who populate the landscape of the plot, of the narrative, of the epic that is the Odyssey? And Martin would say, well, this is almost like the post-heroic age now, and everything has been processed, well, except Odysseus, but the Odyssey certainly processes everything else, and then eventually processes Odysseus himself. But then you ask yourself, is Telemachus going to have an epic career? Is he going to be besieging cities or fighting in chariot wars across a vast plain. No.
So what about Penelope? I mean, she's obviously a very important part of the story.
Yes.
One of our participants just says, well, she can't be the main protagonist if the first word is Andra, the man, but
Yes.
Where does her connection or reconnection come in? Does she have some sort of nostos of her own?
She certainly does, and what I would recommend to people who want to explore this very important question that Sarah poses a bit further, what I would recommend is a book by Olga Levaniouk, Levaniouk, on Odyssey 19. Now, this is a book that's actually available for free by way of the Center for Hellenic Studies, the website of the center, chs.harvard.edu. And if you go to publications and then you click browse all publications and then search for Olga, you'll find her. And the point that Sarah's making about how important Penelope is so beautifully outlined in that book. I would say if she's not the main character, I would say she's 49% the main character, and let's give Odysseus 51%. And there are many indications that Odysseus could not be a main character in the Odyssey without Penelope. So it's very clear that they are complementary. It's very clear that the one time we have a picture of a perfect king in epic, it's a description of Penelope, not of Odysseus, and it's Odysseus in disguise who is describing Penelope as having the features of an ideal king. And there have been many arguments about how this all shakes out in Odyssey 24, but we're not there yet, so I don't want to spoil it for you. But we'll have a lot more hard thinking to do about the importance of Penelope. There, you're tempted to say, well, it's Penelope who's 51% and Odysseus who's 49% of the story. I'm making up these percentages, but I think they're poetically effective.
It's about time for us to wrap up. Is there anything else you would like to
can't
raise
wrap
from
up.
the?
It's impossible. The thing is, if we tackle the first 9 lines of the Odyssey, it means we can never finish, ever.
I need a new metaphor for
yes, the adventure goes on, and it goes on and on and on. And
wrapping up could be a cloth metaphor.
Well, you know, I love the way Cicero talks about the meaning of the verb contexo. Now we all know, we all know in Latin that texo means I weave. So what does contexo mean? Well, Cicero explains it for us. Here I am weaving, and then I'm getting interrupted. So I stop my weaving. I do what I ever have to do, like talk to somebody or do something. Then when I return to my weaving, it's no longer texo, I weave, it's contexo. I pick up where I left off. And contexo is the word that gives us the wonderful English borrowing context. So when Keith says, I'm wrapping it up, or we're wrapping it up, why don't we just say that we stop the weaving for now, but we have to resume the weaving and get back to the context, which is never ending, the next time we meet.
I love it. That's exactly what we're about to do. And we'll pick up again with hours 11 and 12.
Oh, I love it. See, picking up is exactly right. And thank you so much, Sarah and Hélène and Janet, for those beautiful interventions. It makes me just not want to stop, and thank you, dear Keith.
And thank you, Greg. All right. Until
Bye.
next time.